you know. At work, I used to work on the night crew, and I put the radio on. We played 101, and we would play a game. A song will go on. The first one who can name the guitarist got 4 points. Lead singer, 3 points. Anyone else in the band, a point each. So we do it by the hour. Who won each hour? At the end of the night, the one who had the lowest points bought lunch or dinner, at the deli there. So we listened to music 8 hours a night on the night shift, and we all, from aisle to aisle, were yelling over, which guitarist, because the guitarist to us was the hero. I was working at Date Shotwell. It was on Fordham Road, 33 West Fordham Road, in the Bronx.
How old were you?
I started at 15, and I left there when I was 19. Good times, working nights. I was in charge, so I hired all my friends, and we all had the same musical taste. So it was like a night party, but we had to get the work done. I was about 15 years old, and in the 5 and 10s on Fordham Road in the Bronx, they had a cutout bin. And I would go there all the time. I couldn't pass the 5 and 10 without having to see them. People would drag me, and I'd have to go in. And I found a few albums there. One of them once, I found an Iggy Pop album. The cover looked dynamite. So I said, I got to grab this. So I brought it home. I played it the first time. I said, this is too crazy for me. But I got a crazy friend. I'll play it for him. After playing it for him about 15 times, I was caught. This was my music. So I kept going to this 5 and 10. And sure enough, the second Iggy Pop album was there. It was the Stooges. Right? So now I was so smitten that I was looking through every magazine. Now, I was going through magazines galore for any information about who this Iggy Pop is and who the Stooges are. And I found in one of the magazines there's a Iggy Pop fan club in France. So I joined it. And I would get fanzines, all the information that they could find about Iggy Pop. And I think they gave me 5 fanzines and an Iggy Pop t-shirt. And it just blew my mind. And they talked about a new album coming out that David Bowie was involved with. And this is 1972. So I had heard that Raw Power was out. None of the stores would buy it. They said it was hard to get. And my sister finally got someone from Cousin Records in the Bronx to get me a copy. That's the one album, when I put it on, every song just knocked me out. I didn't have to have a second listen to know that it was one of the keepers for life. And I became one of the Iggy Pop advocates. Everyone I met, I told them about Iggy Pop. They had somebody else, Alice Cooper. Yeah, Alice Cooper is biting blood bullets. Iggy Pop is stabbing himself into comas. So that was my Iggy Pop fix. So basically, my brother Michael, with his collection of 45s, was my introduction to music. I guess I was about 10. He was about 14. He was running around every Friday night to go to the dances. And he'd always bring home 45s. They were small records that would have the hit of the day. And people would collect these. They wouldn't collect albums because they only wanted the hit song off of each album. And he had a collection of all these hits. And I would go through them and play them. And I found out that the Rolling Stones were the ones that I enjoyed the most. So every time he would bring home a Rolling Stone or something similar, I would gravitate towards it. And my initiation to music was his music box. They would sell a box where you numbered each 45, and there would be a little card which would tell you what song it is. so that when you bring your little box to the party, you could pull it out and you can check when you leave and that you have everything. Right. So well, I was lucky enough to have Manhattan and CBGB's here. And it just hit a stone with me. It seemed like the groups that I really liked prior to the punk movement were pre-punk. You know, the MC5, Iggy is pre-punk, the Sonics from Portland. I always liked the early American punk. You know, while the British explosion was here and was very popular, I was searching out. They had a group of albums put out by Lenny Kaye, who played with Patti Smith. Before then, he put out a group of albums called Pebbles, which were little rocks, like little rock and rolls. And these albums had great bands from around America playing songs that were pre-punk. And I really connected with that. You know, that we had that music here, and no one was here was listening to it. You know, where England was sending everything over to us, and we were gobbling it up. So I was very happy to see that we had a scene here. And as far as the aggressive nature of the music, you're right, I'm a mellow person, but on a Friday night, I was able to grab the front row in CBGB's, and I just loved the vigor and the rawness of what was happening, because I was tired of seeing groups that played the same song sequence and the same guitar solo every time. And when you go to see a punk show, you don't know what's going to happen because the crowd is part of the show. And for once, I was part of the show. I was the crowd. I was in the front row. I could hear myself on Wire's live album, My Whistle, at the end of every song. You know, so I'm there. Maybe that was part of the excitement.
Tell me about some of the most memorable shows that you saw there at CBGB's.
Right. I saw a Dead Boys show. Now, the Dead Boys came from Ohio, and they were a lot like the Stooges. And Steve Baders, I remember him crawling under the drum and biting himself on the shoulder till blood curdled out. And now I was on the first row, and this really rocked me, like this is rock and roll now. This is unpredictable stuff. And the Dead Boys were a badass band. You know, their album was Young, Loud, and Snotty, and that's what they were. You know, the Ramones, every show was a 1, 2, 3 song, 1, 2, 3 song. 30 minutes later, you were knocked out. I was a big fan of Johnny Thunders, who came from the Dolls. He played a lot, not always at CBGB's. He had a thing with Max's Kansas City. Great shows, a great guitarist, you know, among the top 100. Well, Stooges were pre-punk, plus they also liked jazz, so they try and mix in things. It's funny that you mentioned Morrison, because when Morrison died, the Doors asked Iggy to replace Morrison. So there is a direct connection there. You know, they both had the same type of style. Do anything on stage that you want. There's no rules.
So he was asked and he said no? No, I don't want to be Jim Morrison?
Nope, he wanted to be the leader of the Stooges. Commitment. Commitment, that's rock and roll.
Yeah.
Well, I like both. How can you not? But I'm a big Stones fan because, much like punk, the Stones are a lot closer to punk than the Beatles. To me, the Beatles line up more with pop or rock. I don't look at them as a rock and roll band. Their early music, they were rock and roll. Like they took from Chuck Berry, they took from Little Richard. But then they got into the album scene where they were no longer interested in putting out singles and putting together a complete album. A lot of people believe that Sgt. Pepper's helped destroy rock and roll, because it was no longer, rock and roll was a dance-orientated music. It was a mixture of black dance music and white artists who could sing it and sell it to the white paying audience. And when Sgt. Pepper's came out, the Beatles had a studio, and they really didn't need to add any singles. They wanted to put out an album so that people could sit down and listen to the whole album and enjoy it, which worked. It's a great album, but it made rock and roll much more wider. So I'll go for the Stones, right? Well, for years, people have been telling me about Graham Parsons, and I made multiple attempts at trying to get into his music. There was just too many good reviewers saying great things about him, and I knew the music was there. But every time I made the attempt, I just couldn't grasp it, and it was frustrating me. So finally, I started picking up on a few songs. So I went out and I got the book. The book is right there, 10,000 Miles, and it got me interested in the character. He was born in Florida. His grandfather owned a lot of land with that was used for orange plants, and he was when his grandfather died, he was a trust fund kid, so he was spoiled. When he was 15, he was playing a country and western band, and he was in high school fooling around playing music, and he gained a lot of knowledge on country and western music, going back years, not just what was happening then. When he went to college, he found himself hanging out in New York City, and he formed a band called the International Submarine Band. And it was a country and western band, straight country and western. They put out an album called Safe at Home, and it's a kick-ass album. He couldn't have been more than 20, 21 years old at that point. So then he found himself going to the West Coast. He didn't have to work. He was getting this trust fund, which nowadays money was like $300,000 a month. So he was partying, right? He ran into Chris Hillman from the Byrds in a bank, and they started talking music. Chris Hillman was a country music fanatic, and they both connected, right? So the Byrds were making changes, and Chris Hillman sold the rest of the Byrds, Roger McGuinn, on letting Graham Parsons be the next member of the Byrds. Graham Parsons not only became a member, he convinced them to switch from their psychedelic sounds of 8 Miles High and Jesus Is Just All Right to a country and western album called Sweetheart of the Rodeo. Right? It sold horribly, but today it's acclaimed as the best Byrd album put out. So he was playing with the Byrds, and they went to England. And after playing a show there, the Rolling Stones hooked up with them. And he found an immediate connection with Keith Richards, right? Both of them were guitarists, and Keith Richards wanted to know how you do this country moving with the guitar. How you put the string this way and that way to get these country sounds. And which country artists were good And Graham Parsons was more than happy to help out. So also, they both had their love for drugs. And Graham Parsons supposedly was getting the best coke in town because he had a connection with the dentist who was getting pure coke. So him and Keith Richards became like brothers. They were hanging out night after night, playing music and getting high. And the Byrds had a concert in South Africa. And Graham Parsons refused to go, saying he's not going to play where there's apartheid. He had helpers when he lived with his grandfather. His grandfather had a mansion, and he had black kids that were like brothers to him. He said he wasn't going to go with the band, and they could do what they want with them. So they sacked him. The Byrds sacked him. So what did Parsons do? He decided to hang out with the Stones, right? So him and Keith Richards got along well, and he was showing him all the latest and oldest sounds of country and Western. He convinced the Stones to make the next album in Memphis, and it was the Exile album. He was like an extra Stone. He was there for all the sessions. He was there giving his input, and he had a band then. He broke up with the Byrds, so he decided to form a band called the Flying Burrito Brothers. And on his second album, he had the song Wild Horses. Before it was on the Stones album. It's a little controversy as to how did it end up on the Flying Burrito album here before the Stones album. Graham Parsons insisted that it was a favor that the Stones did for him because he loved this song. Right? A lot of people thought that the Stones wouldn't be able to write a song like that because basically, if you listen to the lyrics, it's not conducive to life in England. So, but Parsons, being a good friend, kept saying it was a favor that the Stones did for him. Recently, in 2013, Mick Jagger's brother opened up and said that the song was written by Graham Parsons, and it was all Parsons. Now, Parsons died in 1972 from a drug overdose. He overdosed at some park in Joshua Tree, right? Yeah. Yes, yeah. Yes, right. And then from the Flying Burrito Brothers, he hooked up with Emmylou Harris and decided he was going to go solo and clean up. So when he completed his second album, which was supposed to be Parsons Harris, that's when he went to celebrate, and that's when he died at Joshua Tree. So 50 years after his death, it is said that a lot of music today wouldn't be what it sounds like if it wasn't for the input of Graham Parsons, what he called American cosmic music, which was basically a mix of country and western, blues and rock and roll. You know, everything was open for combining. You know, a group like the Eagles, one of the members was part of the Burrito Brothers, and he brought the sound with them. So there's a lot of credit that should go to Parsons, which he's getting, which is good. You know, and I finally broke through and was able to get into it. This is a great Graham Parsons album because it includes all the groups that he played with. Sin City, which is about Vegas. Hot Burrito 1 is a killer. You want to listen to one Parsons song, make it Hot Burrito number 1. What a song. You know, and you know, having Emmylou Harris, she was a terrific backup singer for Parsons. You know, she was able to read his lips and stay on target with him. It's a shame that he died young, but he left behind enough music for me to enjoy. And his Bird album, which was criticized as not being very good when it was put out, is now one of the top Bird albums, which I can easily see. I just simply enjoy it all. It's my milder side. When I don't want to hear Iggy and I play too much blues, I sit down and I put on Parsons. And I can get into a little bit of that country.
I didn't know.
I remember when Talking Heads put out their first single, Psycho Killer. Great song. So I decided to go to one of their shows. And I was disappointed. I thought that they were a group of nerds, and they didn't excite me. Now, I should have followed them through, but I made up my mind that I'm going to follow another group rather than stick with Talking Heads. So I just never followed them up. I have nothing against them, but I'm not going to buy their music and listen to it.
Okay, good.
I guess with most people, it's sort of like a soundtrack to their life. My wife tells me that she wished that she could enjoy music the way I did. Of course, whenever there's nothing to do, I always turn to music, and I am engaged. To this day, I try and sneak on a few songs here before we go to bed. She don't sleep here with music, and I love sleeping here with music, and I like all different types of sounds. There are times when I need lower music to mellow out. There are times when I just feel like driving and I want to put on the Stooges and blow it out. Music has been a mass enjoyment because somehow I was able to engage in knowing a lot of bands, and I always had someone to talk with about it. I knew the names of the groups and the names of the players, and I felt special that I was part of the rock and roll community. Okay. Out of everybody in music, I would say Peter Green is my hero. Not only as an artist, which I believe he's the greatest white blues guitar player ever, and as a person. He had no ego. He didn't want no accolades. He named his band Fleetwood Mac when everyone said, no, it has to be the Peter Green group. We need sales. No, he took the drummer, Mick Fleetwood, and John McVie, combined their name. So they put out their first album, Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. He made them change them all. He didn't want his name nowhere. He didn't want his picture on the album covers. He just wanted to be in a band with some comrades and enjoy playing music. He was Jewish. His name was Greenbaum. And he was bullied. This is his father fought in World War II. And the Jews were pretty much looked down on in England because a lot of them died because of the war. And the war was a lot blamed on the Jews. So Peter Green was very bullied, and he was a very soft person, very calm, and at the age of 15, he was playing bass. He went to see the Yardbirds, right? Now, I'm going to add some British guitar players to this, because at this time, Britain had the best guitarists that you could find. And in the Yardbirds, you had Clapton, followed by Beck, followed by Page. So Clapton left because he thought they were getting too commercial. He wanted to play the blues. He joined John Mayall's Blues Breakers, and he put out the seminal album of the whole British blues boom system, which was the It's called the John Mayall Beano album. Why Beano? Because Clapton was reading a comic book called Beano. And it is a killer album. Clapton put together the Gibson Les Paul and a Marshall amp, put it on 10, and invented a new way of playing guitar. To today, if Clapton didn't do that, things would be different. Green thought Clapton was the best. Watched him, followed him. Clapton put out an album with Mayall and left to form Cream. John Mayall was looking for someone to replace Clapton. Now at that time, Clapton was God. Graffiti all over England, Clapton is God. And now he's playing with Cream. So Peter Green got the job to replace Clapton. And they were afraid that everyone was going to be calling, "Where's Clapton?" And Peter Green had to handle Clapton's songs because Clapton left before the album was put out. So Peter Green had to play Clapton's music. Clapton played fast, fast and loud. Peter Green played soft and mellow. He wanted every note to be heard because he wanted his pain to be felt through his guitar. And there became a big argument in England over fast versus slow. And Peter Green was one who had a specific tone. B.B. King went to England out of gratitude for all these English guitarists playing American black music. Because all of a sudden, all the American black blues guitarists were popular again. They were going to England and selling out, you know. So Peter Green album, the second John Mayall album, was called The Hard Road. To this day, they're still arguing over which is the better album. You know, if it wasn't for Clapton, there wouldn't have been a Hard Road.
Which one do you like?
A Hard Road kicks Clapton's album's butt. But Clapton got the Les Paul and the Marshall amp. Peter Green got the same Les Paul and the Marshall amp. That made a different sound. But Peter Green had a special tone. It turned out that Peter Green's guitar had a pickup that was reversed. The magnetic polarity on it was reversed, and it gave a different type of tone. B.B. King asked about the guitarist of England, and he was asked who was the best. He said, "Look, Peter Green is the only one that gives me the cold sweats. He has the best tone I ever heard," and I'm including the blues players in America. Had the boom of British blues.
Okay.
And it brought out a lot of good guitarists. So there was Savoy Brown Blues Band, there was Chicken Shack, there was Jethro Tull, which had Mick Abrams. You know, there was many great guitarists in England. You know, you had the Stones with Brian Jones and Keith Richards. You know, you had George Harrison. So Hendrix went into England, and it became a competition for who is the best guitarist, which was the worst thing for Peter Green. He didn't even want to be noticed, let alone compared to Clapton or Hendrix. And here he is in the middle of every fight over tone versus speed versus, you know. So Peter Green decided to leave John Mayall's Blues Breakers, and he wanted to go to Chicago, go to America, to the roots. His girlfriend convinced him that if he goes to Chicago, he'll get his ass kicked. You know, so stop dreaming and live with what you have. So he decided to take a few friends that he met in the John Mayall Blues Breakers, which was John McVie and Mick Fleetwood, and form his own band, Fleetwood Mac. Now, he didn't want to play in big places. He even took another guitarist, Jeremy Spencer, who was a hotshot guitarist, and he put him up front with him. Green didn't want the spotlight. He had a guitar front with three guitarists who all had their own bands. This way he could hide in the back and enjoy playing as a band and have a beer with his mates after the show. But it didn't work out that way. Everyone wanted to hear Green. Jeremy Spencer would play a song and you'd hear from the crowd, Black Magic Woman, or whatever song was popular that Green wrote then. So Green became very, very famous in England then. And he had a problem. He had a schizophrenic problem. And he was very quiet, and maybe this is why he didn't want to be in the forefront. But the spotlight followed him everywhere. In 1969, the fourth Fleetwood Mac album, basically, he put everything he had into it. And that's when he had his nervous breakdown. He started jamming with Garcia from the Grateful Dead and Santana. And he was spiked with some LSD from Oswald from the Grateful Dead. And then he started doing LSD with Carlos Santana, who adored him. And the LSD plus his schizophrenia made him a hard person to deal with. Certain days he was a happy guy, other days you couldn't even talk to him. But it brought out the best music in him. One of the lines from a song he wrote, Man of the World, where he says, I never wanted to be anybody else, but sometimes I wish I was never born. He had numerous songs where there were indicators that something was wrong. He wound up leaving Fleetwood Mac for a few reasons, but the basic reason was he didn't think he deserved the accolades or the monetary deserts of playing in a rock and roll band. So he left Fleetwood Mac to pursue Christianity. And shortly after that, his schizophrenia jumped in, and he was in the hospitals for a good 10 years. Now, as soon as he left, and all the people from England found out of his plight, these were all his mates. And there was a double album put out. You bought it for me. It was called Rattlesnake Guitar. It was a double album tribute to Peter Green. They took the songs that Peter Green wrote, and some of the best guitarists in the land put up their time, and the money went to help support black blues artists who couldn't afford their hospital bills, right? So he was never forgotten. So for 10 years, he traveled around. He was a grave digger. He was a butcher. He went to Israel to try and connect with his religious roots. And finally, he realized that he had a need for money. And he was convinced to form a band, the Peter Green Splinter Group. But he said his heart wasn't in it. He can't play the blues like he used to because it hurts too much. So even though he played, people showed up because it was Peter Green. But the music was never here the same. He didn't want to get hurt anymore.
And did he die? Is he still alive?
He died in 2020. In 2020, just before he died, there was if I could just find it, there was a concert put out. It was a Peter Green tribute concert, which was attended. Everyone who went played for free, bought their plane ticket, and they played all Peter Green songs. Among the people there was Noel Gallagher from Oasis, Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top, David Gilmour from Pink Floyd, Kurt Hammett from Judas Priest, Johnny Lang, John Mayall, Christine McVie, Jeremy Spencer, Peter Townsend, Steve Tyler, Bill Wyman from the Stones, and many more. And there was a movie made. It's out. You know, I got the double album and the movie here. This was just a tribute. Now, I believe the greatest accolades you can get is when your peers appreciate you and what you did. They played all Peter Green music for that night. It was to thank him for his 4 years as leader of Fleetwood Mac. This box must have been put together 55 years ago. You know, and I've always kept it and tried to keep it up to date. Yeah, let me see. We got, let's see, Rolling Stones at Madison Square Garden. I think this was the concert that Get Your Yayas Out was put together. Before the Rolling Stones, Stevie Wonder's opening act. And Stevie Wonder's guitarist was Jeff Beck. They made a deal. Jeff Beck plays for Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder writes a song for him. He wrote Superstition for him, which was put on the Beck Bogart a Peace album. And the problem was that Stevie Wonder put his version out before Beck had a chance to put his out. So Beck got screwed. But the Stones, they were great. I mean, there was so much pot in that building. I mean, Contact High, you couldn't beat it, you know. I mean, it was unbelievable. I think I was like 16 and blown away. I mean, that was where rock and roll was at. Here's an Iggy Pop. Let's see if the dates there. Well, it was 1970 something, probably 77. And I think I saw him at the Palladium. Great concert. He had on organ was David Bowie. Iggy Pop had a nervous breakdown, and David Bowie put up the money to put him into a place to chill out and get straight. And Iggy wanted to go on tour. David Bowie told him, as a friend, only if I go with you so I can watch you. And that night, David Bowie was on stage with Iggy. Good concert. The place was, I mean, first thing, he saw this guy with these jeans on, and he traded jeans with them. You know, he wanted the more worn out pair. I got Van Morrison at the Capitol Theater. I think I must have seen Van Morrison at the Capitol Theater 4 or 5 times. He always played with the Persuasions, which was a non-musical group. They were a good opening act, but Van Morrison always kicked ass at the Capitol Theater. Savoy Brown at the Bottom Line. I was a big Savoy Brown fan, and I still am. Kim Simmons at lead guitar. He was part of the British boom movement, and his first 5 albums were enormous. One of the better guitarists. He's still playing. He's probably about 70, and I wouldn't buy anything other than his first 5, but his first 5 all are great blues albums, produced by Mike Vernon, who also produced Fleetwood Mac and John Mayall. There's another Capitol Theater. I would only guess that must be... I got Patti Smith Group at the Elgin Theater. I didn't even know who Patti Smith was. It was supposed to be a poetry reading, and Lenny Kaye set in on guitar, and some of her poems, like Gloria, she did semi-singing, which I think opened up the door for her to decide that the poetry isn't going to cut it, and that she's good enough to be a singer. You know, that was one of my better ones. That was like in '75, you know, here before the CBGB scene. Okay, Beacon Theater, New York Dolls. This was New Year's Eve. They kicked ass. I mean, New York Dolls just blew the place apart. And the crowd was as much fun as the Dolls. Would never forget that concert. I think that was one of the last Dolls concerts in New York City. Frank Zappa at, where did I see him? At the Palladium. Every Halloween, Frank Zappa would play at the Palladium and put on a great show. And I must have seen 3 or 4 of them. And this was one of them. Always enjoyed them. One of the shows, he had a big box, and he challenged any girl and all the girls to go up there and put their panties in the box. And about half the audience went up there and put their underwear in the box. Then he let any guys who wanted to jump into the box and swim around. I saw Aerosmith at Central Park in 1974.
Wow, that must have been one of their first shows.
Yeah, Steve Tyler said the only reason why he joined Aerosmith was that when he went for the audition, they were playing Rattlesnake Shake, a Peter Green song, in the background. He said this must be a cool group. Jimi Hendrix and Buddy Miles. This was at Madison Square Garden. I think I was 15 years old. I remember borrowing my brother's clothes because he had some cool clothes, and I wanted to try and fit in with all the hippies. You know, I loved Hendrix at that time. I was one of his original fans, and this was a big thing for me. Turns out I get there, and they have a rotating stage. So you see the front of Hendrix, the side of Hendrix, you don't see Hendrix, and then you see the other side of him, then you see the front for about a minute. And it just goes round and round. Probably a good concert, but the circling of the stage just blew it for me. Buddy Miles put on a good show. He was a drummer, a big black guy who could drum like crazy, and him and Hendrix got together as a group. This was when he was playing with Buddy Cox.
And the Gypsies.
Yes, right, the band of Gypsies. Brinsley Schwartz, that was a group that had Nick Lowe in it. You know, if anyone remembers Nick Lowe, Cruel to Be Kind. It's a Beautiful Day, that was one of the West Coast groups. Blondie at the 205th Street Bar. I had seen Blondie at CBGB's, and she yells out, "What's your favorite color?" I knew she had a song called "You Look Good in Blue." So I yelled out blue, and she came up and danced with me. You know, something that as pretty as Blondie is, you know, I was embarrassed because I don't dance, but I got her attention. Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band, 1974. That was a great concert. It doesn't say, oh, it was at the town hall. They had great acoustics there. Black Sabbath. Would you believe it? I don't remember seeing Black Sabbath, and it was at the Academy of Music in 1972. I guess they were like a third billing act, you know. Let's see. Chicago at Gaelic Park, good concert. The Cramps, great band, a CBGB's band. The Dictators. Now, Dictators is one of my favorite albums. Their first album, Cars and Girls. 75, probably one of the first punk bands, but they didn't get hear the credit. But their first album, I wouldn't buy anything else, but their first album, fantastic.
seems
They actually, the leader of this band was a writer of a magazine, and he had some connections. And where did I see them? Oh, I saw them with the Dead Boys. No wonder why I dug it. The Dead Boys were a great band. Again, the Dictators at Zeps. Great guitarist in that. The Dead Boys at CBGB's. Dead Boys again. Electric Flag. I saw that. I think I saw them in Central Park in 1974 with Mike Bloomfield and Buddy Miles. Bloomfield is one hell of a guitarist. You know, if you want to put someone who can match Peter Green, he's as close as it gets. What a guitarist. Elephant's Memory at Max's Kansas City. That's the group that backed John Lennon. So here my friends saw them and said, oh, let's go see Elephant's Memory. I also seen him at Lehman College. What's this? Elvis Costello and the Attractions at the Palladium with Nick Lowe in 1978. I was very big on his first two albums. His first album was great. His second album was also great. Then he started getting into playing other people's music, and it just didn't fit my mood. It was no longer punk. It was no longer new wave. It was just, something regular, something mundane, you know. Guess Who at Gaelic Park? That was a very good concert. And then I have a lot of CBGBs. I must have seen Johnny Thunders, who was the guitar player for the Dolls. He formed a group called the Heartbreakers, Johnny Thunders Heartbreakers. And I must have seen him 10 times at all different places in Manhattan. The Village Gate, Max's Kansas City. I saw Humble Pie. They were good. Steve Marriott and Peter Frampton. That was good. I remember seeing Edgar Winter's White Trash, and his brother, Johnny Winter, showed up. Both albinos. That was a show. You know. And probably one of my favorite guitar shows that I ever seen was Traffic. Stevie Winwood plays a mean guitar. I'm telling you, I was knocked out that night. He just wailed away. I got more Iggy Pop at the Palladium in 77. Iggy Pop in 77 again. The Jam, which was a popular punk group. I saw Kiss at the Academy of Music. They were third billing. And 1973. Let me see. King Crimson. I always loved Robert Fripp, one of the better British guitarists. He did a lot of playing with Eno. I saw Lou Reed at the Bottom Line and at the Felt Forum. Always loved Lou Reed. He played with Soupy Sale's two kids. They were his guitarists, and they did some great stuff. A lot of Van Morrison. Procol Harum, Patti Smith at Max's Kansas City. The Ramones, there's a bunch of Ramones. Rolling Stones at Madison Square Garden. That must be the ticket that I had. Livingston Taylor, brother of James Taylor, sounded very similar. Cyrus Trixon and the Motor City Bad Boys. They were from Detroit. That was a good night. The Tough Darts with Robert Gordon and Frank Zappa.
Yep.